All right, everybody, welcome to Velvet Bite Radio. It is common knowledge that Dracula casts no reflection. Everybody knows. But did you know that he certainly projects back to us a character full of narcissism? So stay tuned to Velvet Bite Radio as we discuss Dracula, the mirror, the blood, and the narcissism.
Broadcasting from the crypt. Welcome to Velvet Bite Radio.
You've entered Velvet Bite Radio, my friends, where the undead speak and the forgotten bite back. I'm your host, Melissa Dawn Harris, writer, researcher, and devoted wanderer through vampire folklore, history, and film. Each week, we descend into the crypt of culture to uncover the myths, monsters, and meaning behind the vampire's eternal allure. So pour a glass, dim the lights, and let's begin. Welcome to Velvet Bite Radio, my friends. And today I have an incredibly dry voice, but I still would like to welcome you to cross the barrier and step into this shadow realm here with me on Velvet Bite Radio today. We're just going to take a little sip. And of course, you all know, if you've looked at the title, you know what we're talking about today. We are talking about the blood, the control, and the narcissism that is in the pages and in the film of Dracula. And we are going to specifically stick to Dracula today. And I have a very lovely sort of PDF e-zine book for you guys. We're going to navigate that. We're going to stick to Dracula, but this, of course, applies to all vampires throughout the ages. And it is Dracula as the narcissist. And you may have watched the film Renfield from, I believe it was 2023, where they covered just this. A little bit of tongue-in-cheek gothic horror comedy, but we're going to be a little bit more serious about it today. So I keep your questions, post them in there. I will, towards midway, I'm going to go over the comments and we're going to have a conversation about that. But before I do, I'm going to ask if you guys could please, if you have an operational Rumble account, if you could please go over to Rumble and help me out. I had a channel over there that I was streaming stuff to, and we had 450 subscribers. It took me a year and a half to build that up. And while I was doing a bunch of design stuff and dropping stuff over there, it was like, poof, gone. I'm not really too sure how I deleted it, if it was a wrong button, but clearly Rumble needs to make it harder to delete a channel because I'm not sure how it got deleted. So it's gone. A new channel is there. I only have 6 subscribers now and it takes 20 subscribers for you to be able to get a dedicated channel URL. So I'm going to pop it up in front of you guys here. It's a big channel number, but it's there. It's also pinned on the comments in YouTube. But if you type in Velvet Bite Radio, you should get it. And I'll try to stick it in the show notes. But if you could please do that. And the importance of that Rumble channel is that we can hold streams there that we wouldn't be able to hold on YouTube. So it'll be an exclusive stream area to do. So that is the importance of becoming a Rumble channel subscriber. And if you are listening later on to the podcast, go into the show notes, click on that Rumble, subscribe. Also, if you guys go look up Velvet Bite Radio on Spotify, that's my favorite platform to listen. you will see somebody went in and it's like a brand new podcast, and they went and 1-starred it. So if you could go into the Spotify and 5-star the show, that would be very helpful. 5-star it, help it get up there. A couple of people went and 5-starred it to help it go from 1 star to 3.7. So I kind of want to counteract some person just totally, I don't know. It's crazy. And some of the shows that are out already have some wonderful guests, some wonderful information, Gary Parsons, So it's a shame that they felt the need to do that. So I want to thank you guys so much for joining the show. We are going to get into that. Those are my asks. But before we talk about the vampire and Dracula as a narcissist, I don't know if you guys heard the strange news. I want to talk about this for a couple of minutes, and then we'll get right into the discussion and why I chose to talk about Dracula as a narcissist. Most of you that are in the paranormal know who Ed and Lorraine Warren is. And Ed and Lorraine Warren, they were, the early paranormal investigators. They were demonologists. They had their own shtick. They're quite famous. They've got movies made out of them. They've got the Conjuring movies, the Annabelle movies. Their stories are famous. They had lots of books out, books which I have read. I actually enjoyed their books very much. And they had this doll, of course, called Annabelle that the movie is based on, but it's like a Raggedy Ann doll, and they always kept it locked up. And since both of them have passed on, their son-in-law took over the paranormal business, and he's running things. And apparently Annabelle was taken out of her cage or her glass enclosure, and she was on a cross-country tour. For people of interest who wanted to see this cursed doll that was so evil, it could literally knock you out dead. Well, I'm here to tell you guys, if you haven't seen this news, I believe the fellow's name was Dan Rivera. He's a paranormal investigator. He was touring with this doll, this Annabelle possessed doll, and he, in the hotel room, died suddenly. No, they're saying it's unknown causes. An autopsy still has to be done, but he is passed on, and he was touring this Annabelle doll that the Warrens warned everybody about, not to mess with, not to take out of that container. And so it's all over the news in the paranormal world, but it was even featured on the New York Post, as some sort of creepy, spooky story. And, well, I don't know. You tell me what you think in the comments, whether you think creepy dolls can be cursed like the Annabelle doll. Did the Annabelle doll have something to do with it? Is this all for media hype and attention? I mean, obviously it's tragic. This young man, he was only in his 50s, has passed away. They're going to have to do the autopsy to see exactly what happened and why he died. Maybe it was a heart attack, but it was very sudden. It was very unexpected, and it was well on tour. So you tell me what you think. It is a little bit creepy. I'm not fond of dolls. I don't know about you guys, but my grandmother was a doll woman, and I'm telling you, she had her house just stacked with dolls, and it always creeped me out. The Annabelle thing, I wouldn't have opened it. I wouldn't have touched the doll. So I see there's a few of you in the room. I want to thank you guys for stopping by. We are going to get into the information very soon. Thank you so much for crossing the barrier from the normal into the spooky world of vampires. And I apologize for my dry throat today, but it is what it is. We'll try to get through this. So we're going to leave Annabelle. So people are thinking it's a medical issue. Of course. Yeah, absolutely. But the question is did Annabelle have an effect on this man? And, that's what they're going with. Most people are just sending their condolences because it's incredibly shocking. And, of course, the Velvet by Radio And I myself send my condolences for this. So very tragic. And it's one of those things like the Exorcist movie or any horror movie that we like, it just goes right in line with these sort of curses. And who knows? Is it true? Maybe we'll never know. All right, so Dracula, the Prince of Darkness. That's one of the many, many, many titles of actually a Dracula film. We are first and foremost going to focus on the novel. And I'm going to explain to you now, before we get into our presentation, why I decided to focus on Dracula as a narcissist. And it has a lot to do with who Bram Stoker focused his character of Dracula on. Now, there was many venues that he focused on. Of course, he did lots of research of Transylvania because that's where his count is from. He pulled historical resources from the actual Vlad Dracula, and he pulled a lot of resources from Germany and woodcuts that were talking about some of the horrible things that Dracula did. He also pulled from tourist pamphlets and information and military information about the descriptions of Transylvania, and he was quite accurate. And he was, I believe, in the British Museum gathering a lot of stuff and information on this, and he worked primarily on this book over 6 years. It was released in 1897, and it took him 6 years, so he would have started in 1891, and he mainly had to do it after hours, at night, or on vacation. He would often go for a vacation in a little town in Scotland. And of course, one time he was on vacation in a town called Whitby in England, which inspired how he would bring the Count in. There was a big storm, but he was also inspired from a dream. A nightmare actually inspired the brides and all that stuff. So he pulled from a lot of different sources, but a massive factor in his creation of the character of Dracula was the actor Henry Irving. And if you didn't know the history, Bram Stoker was Henry Irving's stage manager, and he ran the Lyceum Theater, and he was constantly at the beck and call of Henry Irving. Henry Irving was a very demanding, arrogant, haughty, hard to get along with, a very controlling individual. And Stoker took all of those characteristics from Irving and probably exaggerated them and then, mixed them. Maybe, as far as we know, he knew, a limited amount about Vlad Dracula. But of course, Vlad Dracula is considered a hero amongst his people. It is Henry Irving that serves as a torment. In fact, Bram Stoker would often have to leave writing his book, leave his wife, hardly spend any time with her. His wife was considered a very beautiful woman in Victorian England, Florence. And they had one child together, a boy, and she was considered very beautiful. And he often had to leave and devote his entire life almost like a slave. There's my dog in the background. If I close the door, he'll dig. So we just let him kind of walk around here and mosey. He'll go lay down in a moment. He devoted his entire life to Henry Irving. And Henry Irving, I suspect, was the massive influence. And I also suspect that many of the characters in the novel of Dracula that are under Dracula's control, like Renfield or Mina Murray, maybe even Lucy, maybe a feminine, are either based or an element of Stoker's personality or how he felt towards Henry Irving, or someone he knew and how he treated that person. There's a lot of his own sexual anxieties in the book, his societal anxieties in the book, and also there was, a lot of Someone said, "Bring in the Hound of Hell." He's hardly a Hound of Hell, which is kind of funny. He's a dog I just rescued, so I'll tell you about that later. So we have this whole dynamic between Henry Irving and Bram Stoker that's basically a master and slave whole thing. So if Henry Irving says jump, Stoker's saying how high, and it's like an entrapment. And although it had some good mixed reviews, there's mixed reviews going on with the book when Stoker first releases it. He does a early release in form of, I guess you could call it a play, but it was more of a recital, a reading of the book. They called it a play. They did it at the Lyceum Theater to a very limited audience, and he did a reading of it. And of course, Henry Irving called it junk, called it crap, didn't like the book at all, was totally negative about it. I find it very ironic that it's so famous all these years later and has never been out of print. And of course, its whole point, Stoker's whole point, was not necessarily to run a play, because it wasn't designed that way. His whole point of doing this reading and to get and then be berated by his master was so that he could establish copyrights. He was very adamant about copyrights, and when he passed away, it served his widow well. She sued the directors of Nosferatu for basically stealing the book and turning it into their movie. So he was always adamant about trying to take control of his intellectual property in Dracula. And of course, Henry Irving's seen no value in it at all. So I find it so ironic and almost a victory for Bram Stoker that it is so successful, more successful than Henry Irving. In fact, the only reason that anyone remembers Henry Irving is because of Bram Stoker's novel. And so we are going to get into this presentation. I'm going to go a little bit smaller here right now. We're going to change the shape of me, and we're going to bring in this presentation. Now, I'm going to remind you before we go through this, we're going to start and we're going to talk about what a narcissist is. This whole easing book is available at my Substack, melissadonharris.substack.com. Now, I encourage everyone to go over there on Substack if you have an account and at least become a free subscriber. When you do become a free subscriber, you'll get access to all the free articles. You'll get access to the free podcast. You will get access to anything that's not behind a paywall. So some of the subscribed articles, they have a little bit of blurb and then a paywall. But you also get a free complimentary read. So if there's anything paid that's on there that I'm writing up, all these articles that I have, and I have a few up there so far, you will get access to one free complimentary article. There is also a free mini documentary on Ted Bundy over there. So melissadonharris.substack.com. Please go over and become a free subscriber. This is also how you can support the show if you become a paid subscriber for $8 a month. It supports everything I do, and I will be updating articles, behind the scene content, zines like this, and all sorts of different content, and maybe even videos and streams there for people who are willing to support the show. So that is melissadonharris.substack.com. Now let's get into Dracula as the narcissist. So first, what we are going to do before we get into anything is we're going to define the narcissist. You will go online today and we will see all sorts of people talking about what a narcissist is. And they will tell you all sorts of things. And there are mean people out there. There's even people who cheat. There's people who do things you don't like, but they're not necessarily a narcissist with a personality disorder. There's some criteria that we are doing from the diagnostic manual that they use in psychology, but you'll see all these sort of influencers that their whole life is basically to talk about narcissism, and they start to micromanage every behavior, and they overanalyze and they turn everything into narcissism. And we're not going to do that today. We're actually going to go from the diagnostic manual. So here we go. This is the actual definition of a narcissist. It's a deeply ingrained pattern and behaviors that's marked by an inflated sense of self-importance, a constant need for admiration, and a striking lack of empathy. It is often comorbid. That means it goes with other disorders and associated with significant impairment in daily functioning and relationships. So the criteria: they're going to have a grandiose sense of self. They'll exaggerate their achievements and talents. They maybe even lie about their credentials. They'll lie about, who they've worked with. They might say they worked with the CIA, or they might get like a job that's really simple, like the janitor of a really high-end company, and they'll tell you they're the CEO. Like, they're really dishonest people, and they lie to have achievements, or they take other people's achievements. They also have a preoccupation with fantasies, unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. They'll have a belief in being special and only understood by other special, high-status individuals. Like I said, they want excessive admiration. They have a sense of entitlement. They feel entitled or expected to have favorable treatment. They exploit their interpersonal relationships. Their friends are not humans to them. They're things for them to use. It's achieving stuff for their own ends. They lack empathy. They don't recognize people's feelings or the needs of others. It's only about what they want. They often are envious of others. They'll deny it. They'll say you're envious of them, but they're envious of others. And then, of course, they're arrogant or haughty behaviors and attitude. That's the 9 criteria. So the DSM says you at least have to have 5 or 6 of these to actually have the personality disorder. So if you're just really insecure and envious all the time, that's not enough. If you just, were having a bad relationship and you made a mistake and cheated, that's not enough. If you were just in a bad mood and a jerk a couple of times, that's not enough. So 9 criteria, 5 or 6 of them, you probably have the personality disorder. And one of the other things that Dracula will have, and we'll take a little pause and I'll go into the chat and we'll see some of your comments, is psychopathy. Now, psychopathy is not actually a clinically recognized term. It's actually called in the diagnostic manual, it's called antisocial personality disorder. It's in the DSM-5, and it's characterized by a persistent pattern of violating the rights of others. So you got to have 3 of these following criteria. The more, the better to be a psychopath or to be someone with an antisocial personality disorder. So you're going to be deceitful and manipulative. You're also going to be impulsive and have no plan, and you're going to be totally unable to plan ahead, or you'll refuse to. You'll also have irritability or aggression. It could even be violence, but it doesn't necessarily have to be violent. You're going to be reckless disregard for the safety of yourself or other people. You're going to have chronic irresponsibility, and then you lack remorse after harming others. So one final thing that I added about people who have this combination of psychopathy and narcissism is the mask. It's like really critical, and a lot of people miss this one. Narcissistic psychopaths are not overtly monstrous to everyone. They can pull off an act. They are able to look at people, analyze them, target them, predatory, and project what they want. So they can appear responsible, they can appear charming, they lie about everything, right? They appear. And usually as you get closer to them or you're around them longer, the mask starts to slowly crack or slip away, or it cracks because you start criticizing their lies and the facade cracks. So that's something important to know about psychopathy. All right, so what are we going on here in the chat? I appreciate you guys. Also remember, thumbs up if you're in the YouTube. Thumbs up if you're over on Rumble as well. We've got Kirby saying hello. Hello, Kirby. Jonicide's in incognito. John Connor. He says, Dracula's narcissistic attitude could have been inspired by Lizzie Bathory's desire to be forever beautiful. I don't know if Bram Stoker knew about Elizabeth Bathory. He might have, but I would have gathered he would have based him on a male figure, because I think female narcissists and psychopath might have some variations on how they behave. They're going to behave a little bit differently than a male figure. All right, so let's go into the novel and get some examples, because it's rife throughout the book. And again, I remind you guys, the book is totally written in journal style. So it's very personable. You're getting this very personal view from Jonathan Harker as he leaves England, goes over to Transylvania, and basically becomes trapped by the Count, who is, basically pretending, or he actually is a client, but he's not who he says he is, okay? So grandiosity and superiority complex. Here, this is one of the very first interactions Jonathan Harker has with Count Dracula. Dracula really expresses himself as extraordinary. He says, "I am the last of my kind. The Sazlaki people are a proud and ancient race. I am the few left. I am special." He's basically defining who he is, connected with his ancient blue blood history. Manipulation and deceit, you see it in chapter 2 again with Jonathan Harker. He invites Jonathan Harker over, and his line, of course, is, "Welcome to my house. Enter freely and of your own will." He's giving Jonathan the illusion that this is an inviting place, and he is here. It's free. It's your own will. Everything's okay. And that's the thing right there. It's showing you how narcissists lure you in to let down your boundaries. And so once you cross that threshold, they consider you fair game. There's a boundary that you will let down with them. You'll get more engaged emotionally. And once you do that and they start knowing more about you, they feel like they have the right. They're entitled, okay? So the lack of empathy and exploitation. One of the most chilling scenes occurs when Dracula forces Jonathan to write a misleading letters home. So he deliberately forces him to tell everybody after he's being abused and seeing all this crazy stuff. Maybe he's even at this point, I don't know if he's seen those female vampires who are eating a baby. I can't remember. But he tells them, "Write to your friends and tell them you are happy and coming home soon," when Dracula full well knows he's never going to let him go. So he wants to mislead the outside world of what's actually happening. Total abuse. So here we have emotional sadism and psychological duress in the book. It's when the Count discovers the Harker discovers the Count crawling. He's crawling like a monster down headfirst down the castle walls, and he's described as lizard-like. It was just an appropriate way, if you ask me, to describe a blue blood elite. And Jonathan says, and this is the psychological duress, he really doesn't care. This is his domain, this is his world, and he doesn't care if he's seen looking, defying gravity and looking creepy. The quote is, "I saw the whole man slowly emerge from the window and begin to crawl down the castle wall over that dreadful abyss, with his cloak spreading out around him like great wings." Okay, so control over women in seduction. He has control over both Lucy and Mina. He sexually controls them. Lucy is the weaker of the two heroines. He exploits the vulnerability with both sensuality, domination. He actually just invades their bedrooms. He tricks them. He just goes in there, feeds on them without consent, and maintains this sort of mask, like I said, the narcissist has, this mystical allure. And so when Van Helsing observes Lucy after multiple feedings, he describes her. "There lay Lucy, seemingly asleep. Her lips were parted, and her breast rose and fell with a gentle breath, but there was a dark mark on her throat." So you can see he's literally taking their life force for himself. He's controlling and dominating and using their life. using the blood. And then, of course, the public mass. To the outside world, Dracula is a nobleman. In private, he's a sadistic tyrant. And he says right to Jonathan Harker when he comes there, we are in Transylvania, and Transylvania is not England. Our way are not your way. So he's right on the front. He's gaslighting. He weaponizes these cultural differences as a way to dismiss Jonathan's questioning. And, Jonathan, there was tons. We always, when we engage with narcissistic people, we have tons of red flags, and there's many of them along the journey. There's many red flags that's calling out to Jonathan that something wrong. And the peasants, the locals even tell him, do not go to this castle. And of course, he fluffs it off. And of course, he has to learn the hard way. So we have some questions in the audience. We'll take a pause here. Kirby says, what about Dracula's oral hygiene? Bram Stoker's Dracula had a really bad breath. Yes, he has these kind of sharpened teeth, bad breath, grotesque. It's kind of another one of these elements. Maybe some narcissists don't keep themselves, but some really do keep themselves well. I think that's variation. It's more of a attribute of he's the living dead, that he has a smell. It's like underneath this dapper count is the grotesqueness of what he really is. So in one vampire documentary, I did hear that other than Prince Vlad, that Bathory had some influence. And they might have had a little bit of influence on it, of course, because he's gathering everything. But the actual real character of Dracula was very much based on Henry Irving. Yeah, it is the side effects of being undead. So those are some examples of how. We'll go back into here, and then we'll get back to the slideshow in a minute. We don't want to go by it too far. Those are some examples of exactly how Dracula is this psychotic narcissist. And if any of you have ever been in a relationship with someone who's incredibly selfish, who doesn't see you as a human being, you're going to see it in the pages. But it's a monster. So he's not just a narcissist. He's combined with psychopathy, because he does not care for the safety of anyone else. His only objective is this blood getting, this bloodletting, this consumption of blood. And next week's show, we are going to actually talk a little bit about conspiracy theory land. We're going to go there. We are going to look at the idea of drinking blood and what it means, and adrenochrome and elitism. We're going to continue on with this discussion. And we're going to talk about why consumption of blood is very unholy. And it is. And it is so right in Bram Stoker. It is so in the Bible. And it is so throughout all the movies. It's a very animalistic way. And it's not about meat. It's about blood. And you are literally consuming another creature's life force. And so it's there in all the pages and where Bram Stoker was inspired, but that's next week's show. I'm looking to see. All right, so let's go back to our little slideshow, everybody. So we had some examples. And remember, of course, this is available on the Substack. And remind everybody to go over to melissadonharris.substack.com if you want to subscribe for free. A lot of the stuff's paid. There's some free content. You get one free Substack article that's for paid members. But if you want to become a paid member, that's how you support this show at the melissadonharris.substack.com. And the podcast audio version is available over there for free. So we got movies. I don't know. In the comments, guys, what your favorite Dracula, not vampire, but what is your favorite Dracula movie? I kind of like Horror of Dracula is really good. The BBC Dracula they did in the 70s is very close to the book. But we have a couple examples of it in the movies outside of the books, because the movies really grab hold of this and they show it to you. Now, most of the movies don't do the books as, close, but it's really hard to take a book and make it a movie. you have to be a really talented scriptwriter to take a book and translate it to film, because not everything that's written on pages works as a film. But they took the real strong elements of Dracula and it's slathered throughout all of the movies. So in one of the most famous renditions of Dracula from 1958, Sir Christopher Lee, who passed away, I believe, in 2015. The example is Lee's Dracula rarely speaks. Letting his eyes and presence dominate. The lack of communication is its own form of control. He's giving you the silent treatment. He's using silence to control his victim. He's forcing the viewer and the victim to fill in the emotional gaps. This silence dominance aligns with narcissists who use emotional absence as punishment or leverage. It's a massive form of punishment. And narcissists do it all the time. They will not talk to you. They'll go from really loving you to not talking to you at all. And so it makes you paranoid. You start thinking, well, did I do something wrong? It makes your mind race, and you have to fill in that silence because they're not interacting with you. And so if you ever are silent and aloof with somebody, just think about that, because that could be construed as manipulation if you use it as a form of punishment. So that happens in Horror of Dracula. He's very, distant and aloof and uses silence for control. Now, of course, in one of my favorite Dracula movies when I was younger is Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992, the Francis Ford Coppola version. And it's his behavior towards Mina is textbook coercive control. Now, we have a different setup here in that he presents her as a long love. He sees her as his long-lost love who committed suicide way back in when he was fighting the Turks in the 1400s. But he gaslights Mina. Whether or not she is his long-lost love, I don't know. He could be influencing her. He could be convincing her that she is. He could be hypnotizing her for all we know, because he invades her dream and insists their love is eternal, despite her clear fear and resistance. The seduction becomes a spiritual entrapment. This mirrors narcissistic grooming tactics. So he's kind of grooming her in this movie. And it was one of my favorite movies, and I saw it as romantic, but it is really grooming. It's funny how you see things differently once you learn how people manipulate. So he's manipulating her, and he's framing it as passion and destiny, and they were meant to be. And people with personality disorders will often say things like, we're soulmates, you're my twin flame. They'll use those kind of words, and that's to really quickly engage you in a relationship and connection with them. So we also have Dracula from 1979 with Frank Langella. It's a really great movie. Frank Langella, of course, played Dracula on stage and then did this film. And we have someone saying Dracula under Langella is underrated. It is insanely underrated, and I recommend you go watch it. They kind of colorized it more and boost up the color for a new copy, but I like the older, kind of more faded version. It had a spookiness about it with that color. So he says, Dracula seduces Lucy and Mina with soft-spoken poetry, emotional intensity, and soft, mysterious charm, presenting himself as a tragic, misunderstood romantic rather than a monster. So when he does this, he refames his behavior, his predatory behavior. He kind of refames it to make her feel empathy and sympathy. He's suffering. Poor him. He can't go out in the daytime, He positions himself as desirable, an ultimate outsider, special, misunderstood, worthy of devotion. And this tactic mirrors covert narcissism. It's more covert. And the mask is he's vulnerable. He needs her help. He loves her. He's mysterious, He's her that mysterious lover. He uses charm to control. But the real stronger men in all of these films, all of these movies, the Van Helsings, Jonathan doesn't see it at first, but Jonathan eventually does see it and becomes the hero figure. Unless you're watching Horror of Dracula, that something different goes on there. But they see this figure and they realize it has to be vanquished. They see it for what it is, where everyone else is charmed by the mask, by the manipulation. So last but not least, I put 2024, but Renfield from 2023, it outwardly tells you this movie is about poor Renfield, the servant of Dracula, who originally travels to Transylvania as Dracula's real estate agent, goes crazy, goes mad, comes back to England, is put in an insane asylum, and that's when they send Jonathan over to finish the job of Dracula purchasing property in England. So Renfield film, it shows him in modern times. He's always been a slave to Dracula and serving him, and it uses this dark humor to reference toxic relationships and codependency. So Renfield is codependent on Dracula no matter how much abuse he gets. He's there. He's literally become a monster vicariously because he's getting all his victims, setting people up. And of course, Dracula makes sure he stays there. In this movie, he says, "You deserve better, but you'll never get it without me." Typical thing that narcissists will say. In fact, my ex-husband would say that to me all the time. "You're a loser. Nobody likes you. And you will never do good. When you leave, you're going to be like a welfare." Like, it was awful. Some of the things that I had to listen to. That is a typical narcissist. Dracula is weaponizing the guilt and dependence. He's focusing on their insecurities, and he's just exasperating it. He's making it bigger and making them really feel his power and that he's the one who makes everything happen. He's strong. My husband was very much like that. Not quite so psycho in Dracula, but it was always about my ex-husband, not my current husband. It was always about him being the center of everything, and you were just there to do what they wanted. So this version of the vampire isn't just evil. He's emotionally strategic. He's manipulating your emotion, targeting it, moving on in. Okay, so I'm going to go up to the big screen again, and we'll continue in a few minutes. The show is going by rather fast. Thank you guys, everyone. Once again, I'm going to remind you guys to subscribe to the Rumble channel, because that is where we're going to have the exclusives. And I lost the old channel with 450 subscribers. So if you were subscribed to the old channel, you won't be subscribed to the new channel. It deleted. We're not sure how, but you can definitely go and check that out. Type in Velvet Bite Radio, and it will be there on the Rumble channel. It's brand new. I've gone from 450 subscribers to 6, and I need 20 to have an exclusive, like a URL. So they won't let me change it to Velvet Bite Radio until I get that. So we will do exclusive streams there, things that I don't want to put on the YouTube channel that might get copyright, or we'll go through a documentary, and I'll announce that. So please do take this time to subscribe there. I really appreciate it, guys. All right, commentary. A lot of people like the Coppola version. John Connor in the audience says definitely Coppola's version, with how he respects the diary format. He respects the diary format. So he's actually Coppola's showing you how the book is written, and he's giving you all these layers: typewriter, written diary, train smoke, Art Nouveau, places where, the silent films were done. It features, blood transfusion, cuts to blood bubbling around. You get this sense of like opium, heroin, and there's all this stuff that he's layering on that shows you that it's Victorian culture. So, and the seedier side of Victorian culture as well. So it's great. Coppola also presents all the characters like Quincy P. Morris and Jack Seward and Arthur Homewood in their proper relations that they are in the book. And of course, they add the love story. They add the really dysfunctional, unhealthy love story between Dracula and Mina. It's a little bit crazy, but it is how it is. So it's true. It does it. So we're going to go back. Got a few more pages, because we're going to discuss some other elements of manipulation and how Dracula would possibly do that. How is he getting under her skin? And there's a lot more to what I have here. So feel free to add things that you see in any vampire movie or any Dracula movie in the content. And when I'm done the rest of this, we'll go over your comments. So give you time to think of some things. And if you're listening on the audio podcast, put a comment in, or if you're post listening, leave me a comment. I want to know what you think. I want to know how you see abuses or your experiences. You can put them in the content and do so anonymously, of course. So, cycle of abuse. We're going to get into telling you how Dracula or how abusive people will actually abuse you. What are they doing? What's the process? Well, the first process is to get in there fast and idealize you. That's love bombing. The vampire is charming, mysterious, powerful. He love bombs you. He will compliment you. He will tell you how amazing you are, even if you don't feel that way. And usually, they know, an abuser knows your insecurities, and they will try to make you feel like, no, you're not this. You're amazing. They'll be everything that you've always wanted to make you feel good about yourself. They'll do that. And so the intended victim will be his sole focus, and he'll make them feel that. He'll make them feel wonderful and great. They will be made to feel very special and even loved, although it's a false love. The narcissist is very adept at finding perfect victims. They are really predatory. They watch your moves. They'll see any insecure body language or the way you talk. So after they pull you in with all of this, they'll start the manipulation. You'll see it slowly at first. It's called the devaluation phase. They escalate control by making you jealous, trying to isolate you, and try to use fear to make you afraid. They'll hold their emotions. They'll do the silent treatment. They'll gaslight you to make you think what you're seeing when you question them is not real, that you are crazy, that you are not seeing things, you're loopy. If the intended target starts to question the vampire, or in this case, in reality, the narcissist, they might even switch back to the idealization phase for a bit and be loving. But each time they go from idealization to devaluation, back to idealization, that idealization period gets shorter and shorter. They can't put up the act because the idealization is an act. It's fake. It's not who they are. The devaluation is the mask falling off and you're seeing things, you're questioning it, but they're manipulating you to keep you there still. And each time, like I said, the idealized period is shorter and the devaluation is longer. The control period gets horrible, worse, more manipulative. There might be drugs involved. There might be financial control involved. You see, Dracula does this right in his castle to Jonathan. He controls him in there. He traps him. He's got all the money. He makes people think that he isolates him by making him right back to his relative. That's everyone's fine. He's keeping him away from everybody. It's right there in the book. So the third stage of abuse is discard or capture. So he's already captured Jonathan in the book, but he does that to his victims, but then he kind of discards them. If he has used them for everything he can, they're consumed, or maybe they're transformed or left irreversibly changed. Once the vampire or the narcissist has gotten the energy, the life they need, the use out of the person, whatever it is they wanted, and they no longer find them useful, they'll discard them. In a vampire's case, they might kill them, or they use and abuse them as a slave with no will of their own, and they'll repeat certain devaluation, discard. They'll stick right between 2 and 3 for a while. And then if you do escape and you get away, the fourth stage is hoovering. They'll try to get you back. It's called hoovering because of the vacuum. Suck you back in. No pun intended. The vampire, if they let you live and you escape, and you distance yourself, you start realizing you try to get away, they will return. They might even use idealization at first. They might seduce you some more. They'll beg you. They'll remind you of your past. Remember when we first met? La la la. Do you remember this picture of us doing this? They're trying to get back in. It's a reference to being sucked back into the abuse cycle, but they'll make it look like, I've changed. I'm going to go to therapy. I'm going to do this. Please come back. We know that's a huge, huge cycle of abuse. And I'm sure if you've been with crazy people or abusive people, you've experienced this, and you can let me know in the comments, anonymously, of course. Now, The trauma bond. And I specifically put these bloody fangs here because the trauma bond, in my opinion, with a vampire happens when that blood exchange happens. You're bonded to them. In the Mina's case, she becomes bonded traumatically through these experiences. All that shifting through those cycles of abuses bonds you to them. So you can never escape. And when you try, they do the Hoover. So trauma bonding occurs when a cycle of abuse and reward creates a powerful emotional attachment between the victim and abuser. Even if you know they're abusive, they've gone through those 4 stages with you over and over again, that you're bonded, and you may not be able to get out. You may not have financial independence. You just, you might be seriously trapped. The victim becomes psychologically dependent on the abuser. Their brain also is traumatized, broken down. They don't know how to function anymore by themselves. And so they become dependent, and they don't know what else to do, who to go to, because they've been so isolated and so controlled that their brain is actually damaged. They're unable to leave the relationship. They're unable to get away from the vampire. Maybe Bram Stoker was unable to get away from Henry Irving all his life. So we got some examples. In Bram Stoker's Dracula, Mina is both terrified and enthralled by the Count. He invades her mind and her body. He manipulates her dreams and emotions. And at one point, she begs Jonathan not to judge her, indicating shame and self-blames. She's been trauma bonded. She's literally taking the shame and the sin onto herself. And Dracula doesn't care. He's going to go shame and sin, and he let her live with the trauma of that. In another example, Lucy is visited repeatedly by Dracula in the night while she's weakened by sleepwalking and anemia. And she responds almost trance, passive-like. She's literally controlled zombie-like by him. And she just allows whatever to happen. And she does not fight back. She does not push back. She just submits. And she just becomes a passive participant in her own demise until she finally dies and becomes the undead. And so Jonathan Harker is trauma bonded, of course. When he first comes there, he realizes he's a little bit stronger than the other one, but he realizes he's a prisoner. And Dracula puts off this polite sort of, you could say, a very mannerly way, like he's innocent. He's pretending like everything's okay. But at the same time, he's denying him freedom. He's like, what's wrong? Everything's good. And he's manipulating him. And then he shifts his tone. He becomes menacing, and doors are locked. Warnings are given cryptically. Read between the lines. Dracula becomes more controlling. He does the control and the bonding in a different way, more aggressive, because Jonathan's a male. He doesn't do it sexually. And he terrorizes him. So in another scene, Dracula's forcing Mina to drink his blood. That creates the psychic. That's the blood exchange is another form of a trauma bond. It's a psychic bond, so he can control her and manipulate her emotions. I don't know what would be an exact example of that. Some people could share blood in real life and cross boundaries like that, but perhaps mind control, taking drugs, alcohol to control you. It takes stronger people who really love her for her true self to free her from Dracula. And so our last example of the trauma bond is Renfield. And he tries to warn Mina and defy Dracula. And he's so bonded to him, he cowers and apologizes to Dracula. And Dracula eventually just kills him. Dracula always tries to keep him bonded by false promises of immortality that he never intends to give him. And he uses that. He reveres Dracula. He still gets on his knees and begs for forgiveness. Tries to escape a little bit by warning Mina. But at the end, he is ruthlessly murdered and disposed of. How dare he betray? How dare you do that to me? I've heard that so many times in the world. So that is, and I will get to your guys' comments. Keep them coming because we're going to go over them at the end. I just got a few pages. So that is a trauma bond. It's really devious because it's presented as love at first. And you become a distorted person and you lose yourself because You are bonded in such a cruel and vicious way. Not real love, not real comfort, not real kindness, not real support, not real empathy. None of that is there in Dracula. And of course, the cultural mirror. Okay. The reason I'm talking about this in the first place is because we see this in our culture. We see it all over the place. So in this image, I have Lugosi's Dracula looking in the mirror. And so you see this Dracula does not cast a reflection. And in this scene here, Van Helsing tricks Dracula, opens up the mirror to show him himself. And that's the whole thing. When you show a narcissist and you mirror him, there's nothing there because he's a creature that consumes everybody. He has no soul. He is doing sinful things of taking other people's life force. We will talk about that in the next show next Thursday. So he's doing these very sinful acts. He has nothing to him. He's all false. All the nice stuff that he presents himself, there's nothing there. And of course, when you prod a narcissist's fake persona and pick it apart, they go into a narcissistic rage. And in this scene between Van Helsing and Dracula in the 1931 movie, that's exactly what happens. Dracula reacts with rage at the mirror and him being exposed for what he is, and he smacks the mirror out of Van Helsing's hand. And he says, "You know too much, man. You know too much." So right away, the vampire, the narcissist, will withdraw, but they'll come back and they'll try to destroy the target that's exposing them. It's also, the vampire is a symbol of a larger societal narcissism. In a media-saturated world, we got our curated images, obsessive self-presentation. This Dracula also says immortality, youth. I will give it all to you. And we're always in the conquest, myself included. We all want to look good and younger. That is an obsessiveness in our culture. The plastic surgery is off the charts, and we know this stuff is really helmed in Hollywood. Ironically, Hollywood is highly narcissistic, and they're the ones who, really have formulated Dracula. They've used Dracula. I mean, Dracula is literally like who they are. It's so strange. So everything's exaggerated, mythologized, and unchecked. He's left unchecked in society. There's no raw facts. It's just narcissism, me, me, me. How do I look? Look at me. Come over to Instagram, look at me all the time. So the quote was, he looks in the mirror and sees nothing. We look in the mirror, see a brand. We feel empty. We need to keep consuming products. There's that idea with our culture. All right, so we're going to tie this up. The last one is reclaiming the self. Okay, so I know there have to be some of you out there who have been in a relationship that really you didn't know who you were at the end of it. And my first marriage was like that. I had zero, like the Melissa before that 14-year marriage and after, she didn't even know who she was. She didn't have an identity. And I remember crying and saying, and crying on the floor when I said, I'm leaving, saying, I feel like the invisible girl. I feel like I don't exist. And everything is just you. Referring to my ex-husband. I remember saying that. Everything is you. I feel like I don't exist. And it was true. It was a true thing. And it was like really a devastating thing to say after 14 years, to recognize I don't exist here. Just you do. And everything's about you. And you're just selfish. So in this reframing, like I had this weird discussion with ChatGPT when I was writing this article. I would say, hey, what can we do to reclaim the self? And ChatGPT came up with something weird, and I told it no. It came up with, claim the vampire, be the vampire, own the vampire. And I was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not, ChatGPT. And I told ChatGPT what we were going to do. And you don't claim the vampire. You reclaim your old self. You'll never be your old self, right? You're never going to be who you were before, but you can go back to your identity and try to redevelop that, and then realize, okay, you're a little damaged. You have all this information, but there is a true self. There is like your spirit. No one can take that from you. It's God's gift to you, right? There is yourself, and you kind of have to get back to that idea of yourself. So in all this, the goal is not to wield the vampire's power more ethically or to be a vampire. It's about shedding this curse altogether. And that's what the whole point in the movies, when they release these women from the curse of Dracula, or they stake them, or they kill Dracula and the curse is lifted, they're being returned to their soul and to who they are. And a lot of people take that as, oh no, they killed the count and they're not allowing Mina to be a hoe, like they're taking her sexual identity. No, they're returning her to herself. That's beyond all that. Parts of yourself that you lost to manipulation, to gaslighting, to sexual control, to making you jealous, to, controlling your finances, they may even control your food, all that stuff that was controlled, you're taking it back and you're trying to rebuild a stronger identity. And so what you believed before, the bite I put here, because we were talking about vampires, how you loved without fear, and how you loved yourself, and you not without fear, but you love with boundaries and you take your time. A lot of people, if they're desperate or they're insecure, they might rush into something really fast. The softness that once was safe, the dreams you abandoned in exchange for someone else's domination, or their fantasy, or their idea of who they were. A lot of times we put our own stuff aside. And that's what a lot of this represents. So this plays out in most Dracula films by the male heroes vanquishing the vampire, like I said, and the curse being released, or staking the victim, and their old self is revealed. The beauty is revealed, not the horrendous female, predatory vampire. It's not necessarily a returned innocence, like I said, but it's like a more authenticity. You're not a sniveling slave doing what somebody wants because you're afraid that they'll abandon you, or you're afraid that you'll be alone, or you're afraid of this or that. And by the way, manipulative narcissistic vampires, of course, as mentioned here, can be both male and female. So you have females who manipulate people and manipulate men, or may manipulate other females. The vampire really becomes a metaphor for a false identity that trauma can create. Strong, yes, disconnected, cold, and controlled. And it's not, those things are not healthy for humans. They don't raise healthy children. They don't have healthy relationships. They have no soul. They are just an empty void. So that is it, my friends. That is the slideshow. That is available at Melissa Dawn, not melissadawnharris.com. That's the website. It is available on the Substack. If you become a paid subscriber, there's free stuff there too. So remember, melissadawnharris.substack.com. It is there. Wow, my throat is just going raw. Thank you guys so much for listening. Let's go into the comments, because we're going to make a big again. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. We're going to go into the comments here and we're going to see what everybody has to say, because I know people have experience with narcissists, and I know that it's horrifically traumatizing, and you hear about it and you see it more, but it's obviously not just a common thing. It's not just a modern thing. It obviously existed, because if it did exist, Bram Stoker wouldn't have written about this Dracula so perfectly as a narcissist. It's just so perfectly done. And it replicates that clearly. I'm sure there's other people who talk about the vampire as a narcissist, and it's the perfect metaphor, because they are literally draining your identity away, trauma bonding you, gaslighting you, manipulating you, all to do their will as they get stronger and more powerful and more bold in their false self. And they go for more victims, and they just discard you, throw you out like tissue, and move on to the next person. Or they'll use you and they'll have other people hovering. They'll triangulate. They'll have other people they're having sex with, and they'll do all sorts of crazy, crazy stuff. So let's go into the comments here. And we'll start with Sean. Other than drinking blood, I don't feel Dracula enjoys the corruption of human beings as it defiance against God. In the book, he does. So you might be getting into some movie ones, but in the book, he's pure evil. He has no empathy, nothing. There's nothing there. That the book, he enjoys it very much. He doesn't care at all, and he's presented that way. I think we get mixed in with a lot of the films where they present a more compassionate Dracula, but he's just not like that in the novel at all. At all. Someone say, I will dare say that Gerard Butler did a good job in Dracula 2000. I enjoyed Dracula 2000 as well, John. I thought he did a great, and it was an interesting twist with the sort of him being the Judas kind of figure, and the really Christian context. It's an interesting twist. Then we have Kirby saying, in Dracula 2000, I seem to remember that the vampire brides had bad breath too. If you becoming a vampire, there ain't no mouthwash that's going to help you. You're going to stink. You're a rotten corpse. That's why you're a rotting corpse. That's why you have to take the blood to keep you young. You're literally from beyond the grave, and you're defying the natural order. You're defying God's natural order. And how many times in culture today are we defying the natural order with all the technology and weird technology? It's getting weirder. It's not just to help you if you have a disease or you have a flu or something. It's just weird technology. Bill, welcome to the channel. Bill says, Dracula spent centuries living inside his own echo chamber. Very good. I love that. His castle. Anyone residing there, alive or dead, was completely subservient to him. Perfect breeding ground for narcissism. That is an excellent point. He does. And a lot of elites, blue bloods are like that. If they have their own little village and they rule, and somebody who doesn't live that way comes across them, they're going to be like, what's going on here? And like I said, Jonathan has so many red flags on his journey. People are trying to tell him all along, don't go to that castle. That's evil. Don't go. But, he's a modern man and he thinks it's silly and foolish, and he learns the hard way. John says again, Dracula definitely manipulates with the possibility that he will make others immortal. And here's the thing, Dracula has a different relationship with each of the characters. So sometimes he wants to give them the mortality so they'll be his bride, and sometimes he uses it to dangle in front of their face. The short story is, if you're a good person, you just don't do that. You don't say, well, I'm going to make you special for a little while and give you immortality so you'll be my bride and I'll have a harem. And I'm going to make you my servant and I'll lie to you and dangle you along till the next one. You're just straight up. If you're doing those behaviors, you're just not a nice individual. Sean Asad's comment says, so is Dracula a narcissist because he's a vampire, or because in W.S. raised as royalty, taught from a yearly age, he is better than other people? It could be a combination of both. Stoker never actually says how Dracula became vampire. In the Francis Ford Coppola movie, they tell you how he became. They fill that blank in. He's this warrior. He's off to battle. Sorry for any disappointments, people. It's about to be a spoiler alert here, so turn it off. There's going to be spoiler alerts on this podcast. And so his wife, Elisabetta, she is shot a letter from the Turks that he's in battle with that says he's dead. She believes it. It's a false letter, and she jumps off the castle into the river below and commits suicide, and he becomes a vampire. By realizing this, when he comes back, he denies God. He consumes blood in the cross, and it says there. I don't want to ruin next week's show because we got some Bible quotes to go on about blood drinking and why it's bad, but it's not good, and it's against God, and it's written right in the Bible that you do not drink the blood of animals. John's take on that one was probably both being born into royalty and how his vampire power makes him feel to be a god amongst monsters. Yeah, I think that's probably correct. He is born that way, and so perhaps his ego. And this is why narcissists, they want to live forever. They don't want to get old. Narcissists don't ever want to die. They want to be forever beautiful. They are very shallow. There's not a lot to them. So it would make sense that to represent him as someone who's always trying to stay young and relevant through taking from others. And so it could be a combination. So we have, Josie said, I dated a narcissist and she was physically abusive and played the victim, but not while everyone saw, though, through it. A lot of times they do that. That's a common thing too for women. they will be abusive, and then they'll feign a weak woman, and they'll take you to court, and they'll be like, he hit me, I'm so weak. They'll feign that personality. Does he enjoy the corruption of humans? I think he does, because there's that sadistic part of Dracula in the book. Now, it might be written in very different ways in different movies where he doesn't enjoy it, where he feels guilty. Like, think of a Barnabas Collins. That's Dan Curtis wrote up, he was one of the first to do this sympathetic vampire, because vampires right from folklore on are not good news. Dracula's not written that way in the original text. He's not written with any empathy at all. If you have some empathy, then you're not exactly entirely a narcissist. So we couldn't make that connection. Narcissists and psychopaths, they do not have empathy for anyone. They don't have empathy for their victims. So I think he does enjoy it, and I think it gives him more power to watch the pain. And if you go into the book, one of the closest renditions to the book is probably, I don't know if it was done in 78 or 79, but the BBC did a version of it. It's very play-like, it's very theatrical, and it starred at Louis Jordan. That's really close. Christopher Lee also did a version that's not Hammer horror. It's Jess Franco. It's an Italian movie. He did a version of it. It's good because he actually plays the visual description of the Count. He looks very similar, because in the book, the Count starts off of old and he becomes young again. And that's something that Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula reiterates to you, that he starts off old and then slowly becomes young as he takes everyone's energy in the modern world. As he moves over to the West and consumes everyone's blood, he gets younger and more powerful. This is something that is really well defined. It's defined in that Jess Franco Dracula with Christopher Lee. It's not as well defined in a lot of vampire movies, although some. The Coppola Dracula, when he's old and we meet him, the Gary Oldman figure, he has that kind of kabuki white hair. That is not how Dracula is described. They took some liberties on that in the Coppola movie. It was fun. It was very flamboyant. It was a lot of kabuki, very oriental influence. The designer, the costume designer was Japanese, I believe. And so it's a little bit different look. Oh yes, Jack Palance did an amazing performance as Dracula. Again, it's a sympathetic version. The Love Long Lost, and that's a Dan Curtis production. Again, the guy who did Dark Shadow. Dan Curtis, his mother died right in front of him when he was about 13. She had an aneurysm and she dropped dead. And he had this thing with presenting this long lost love. He did it in Dark Shadows. He does it in Dracula. He's one of the first, at least in modern television and movies, to present this twist where Dracula's here to, he's a monster, but then he has a backstory where he's become that way because he lost his love. And so I think that's heavily influenced by Dan Curtis's loss of his mother, whom he loved very much, and sheer death was really sudden and really tragic. And so that's an interesting take on the Dracula myth. And I'm just going to have a little sip here. You guys, if you have any more comments, let me know. I'll pop them up. But the whole idea of Dracula and what Dracula represents and how Dracula is in the book, and it's cruel and it's mean and it is self-serving. The peasants around the castle, they're also terrified of him. They're absolutely terrified of him. And the other dog's coming. He's like, who's this Dracula, Mom? What is he doing? Why are you hanging around him? So, yeah, they're all terrorized by him, the villagers, and that says a lot. You're not a nobleman whose people love you and think they're safe with you. You're a nobleman whose people fear to even encounter your name, let alone encounter your presence. Okay, so I'm going to tie this show up because the dogs have decided that this is enough Dracula. Oh my goodness, they've decided to burst in and have a little bit of a fight in the background. So if you guys don't have any more comments, I'm going to let you know what's going on next week. The show title is going to be something like Adrenochrome and the Vampire, the Archetype of Fear, Folklore. In fact, we're going to go through this blood stuff. We're going to talk conspiracy theory. It's going to go there. So we're going to go into Adrenochrome and elites and blue bloods. And it's about the vampire. So it's more general. It's not going to be just Dracula. So we're going to talk about that next week, next Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern. I hope you guys will be here. And once again, if you guys want to go over to the Substack and get the your first free article, subscribe free, free content over there. There's paid stuff. That whole Zine little book presentations over there for subscribers. It is melissadonharris.substack.com. And of course, Rumble. We're going to have exclusive streams there for things we can't have on YouTube. So if you have a Rumble account, please go over to Velvet Bite Radio and subscribe on the Velvet Bite Radio podcast. Also, if you go to melissadonharris.com, all of the links are there to all of the stuff. Watch on Facebook because I post a lot of updates there. There is the Velvet Bite Facebook page. So you can check that out there, guys. I hope you enjoyed that presentation. Let's see. Jonaside says, on Cops, Dracula the Roma, the G word, love Dracula. John says, I'm glad to be a part of his channel on the subject of vampires. And it will expand. You know, I'm trying to get some round tables. So we're going to do a show next week. And then we'll probably do an open Q&A. And we'll talk about more things other than Dracula. I just wanted to go into this one about... I'm seriously going to give these dogs up for adoption. The little Turks. They're playing tug of war now. They're playing tug of war. Little buggers. Mrs. Renee, thank you for stopping by. Thank you so much. I will be basically doing that and then some Q&As, and I hope to get some guests on to come and talk about the Q&As. I've sent out a few emails, but we might be doing this solo for a while. It is a very specific one. I also want to do some recipes from the book and do streams and do videos about how to make stuff and things like that. So hopefully we'll be able to go all those places. I thank you so much, my friends, for joining the Velvet Bite Radio. So I'm now going to release you to cross back the threshold into the life of the normal and through the barrier, out of the shadows, until next time we meet again to talk about everything vampire. Thank you so much.
Broadcasting from the crypt. Welcome to Velvet Bite Radio.
You've entered Velvet Bite Radio, my friends, where the undead speak and the forgotten fight back. I'm your host, Melissa Dawn Harris, writer, researcher, and devoted wanderer through vampire folklore, history, and film. Each week, we descend into the crypt of culture to uncover the myths, monsters, and meaning behind the vampire's eternal allure. So pour a glass, dim the lights, and let's begin.